So now we're ready to embark on actually doing the main content of the page. And what we're going to start with is this giant picture of the restaurant, of the interior of the restaurant, which is actually what's called a Jumbotron in Bootstrap speak. However, before we start, we're going to have to define some element that's going to be a container for everything that is inside of our website. And that's simply because, remember, we put in the container our header and we want everything nicely aligned to its edges. So we need a top level element within our main content to have a container class assigned to it. Let's go ahead and start with that. Let's go back to our code editor. Let's open up the index.html that is located at this point in the examples lecture 34 after folder. And we'll go ahead and scroll down right below our call button right here. And we'll open up another div. We'll say div.container. And we'll press tab. And that's the Emmet plugin that's helping me do this. And we'll actually give it even an ID, so that way later it will be much easier for us to target it. We'll call it main content. Main content. Okay, so here's our main content, and now we're ready to code up our Jumbotron. Well, the way we're going to code out our Jumbotron is we have a whole bunch of images in the images folder, and as you could see, Jumbotron, they all are sized very differently. The first one is 768, that one is 768 pixels wide. Then there's Jumbotron 992. That one is 992 pixels wide, and finally the 1200 one is the biggest one there. And obviously what we want from this is to be able to substitute different pictures, different resolutions, depending on the screen size. So assuming the smaller screen size, the smaller device, and it's probably mobile, and therefore we don't want to waste our bandwidth. So let's go ahead and create a div that is going to contain our Jumbotron. We'll press tab here, and that's the div. And what's going to happen is we're going to assign a background CSS property to this div, and it's going to load the image responsively, meaning depending on the media query that it's going to appear in, it's going to load different size image. However, we have one limitation. We can't stretch and contract the image when it is sized that way as a background image. And we need it to stretch and contract when it's very small. And I'll show you in a minute what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and paste a little bit of code here, and I pre-baked this code for you before. And what it's doing is it's creating an image tag. And the image tag is taking the smallest Jumbotron picture there is and assigning some alt text. And this is the most important part here. The classes. The class IMG responsive comes from Bootstrap, and basically what it says is as I change the width of the browser, the width and the sizing of the image is going to change proportionally. And that's very important for us, something that we really can't do with a background image very well. And also, I'm only going to make this visible when the screen is extra small, which means if I save this right now and go back to my browser, I'll see that this is showing up, but the image is not showing up. But if I squeeze the browser all the way to extra small, you'll see that the image actually showed up. So I want only this IMG tag to show up when it's extra small, but for higher widths of the browser, I'm going to use a background image in order to size the image. Notice that we already see the effects of our container div. You could see how the edges of our header are aligning very nicely with the edges of our main content. Okay, so let's go back to our code editor, and we'll open up our styles.css file, and we'll go ahead and load our Jumbotron images in its proper media query. So the first one is going to be for the large devices right here. And again, I'm going to cut and paste some pre-baked CSS. So here's our Jumbotron. And what we're doing is basically we're adding to or overriding some of the properties that the Bootstrap Jumbotron class had. So number one is we're assigning a background URL to be the largest Jumbotron image there is, and we obviously don't want to repeat that. And we're setting its height because, as you know, background images don't affect the height of the element, so therefore we need to set the height. And we're giving it some box shadow and something that You should look up how that works. It's very, very simple. And we're giving it a 2-pixel border so it'll stand out a little bit better. So let's save that and go ahead and look in our browser to see how that looks. So here's our Jumbotron, and you could see that we have the border, some of the box shadow going on around it, and it's looking pretty nice. However, if we squeeze the browser a little bit and it becomes smaller than the large size, again, the image disappears, obviously, because we haven't really assigned an image to that size. So we'll go ahead and go to our medium devices only section of the media query, and we'll go ahead and paste another Jumbotron image, and this one is going to go right here. And here is some pre-baked code that I have. And again, the background URL now is going to be 992. That should match the lower bound of this media query. And I'm decreasing the height a little bit. As you could see, the box shadow is basically the same and the border the same. Now we still need to repeat this because we didn't really factor it out and we didn't put it outside of the media queries. So we need to repeat these parts, but it's not such a big deal. I guess in the future we could pull it out of here altogether and put it outside of either media query. That way they could share it. So let's go back and check if it works. So now we should be by the medium size, it should switch to a smaller image. That's good, that's working. But when we get to small again, it's not there. So let's go back to our code editor and we'll go to the small devices. And again, I have some pre-baked CSS that I already wrote prior to this lecture. So we'll go ahead and cut and paste that here. And you can see now I'm using the lower bound JPEG Jumbotron that's matching this. And the height again is a little bit smaller, and the box shadow and the border again are the same. So if I save that and go back to my browser, so now I have the largest image at this size, a little bit smaller image at this size, and yet even smaller image at this size. And when we get to this size, we still need to do some styling, but at least you could see that the smaller image is showing up. And every single time, this is something that when you obviously go on a real device that's going to be a particular size, that means only one image will download. That's actually a little bit incorrect because we do have this image that we are always loading, which is that small image. And that's really going to not really hurt us too much on the larger device sizes. But when it's in a super small device size, which is, your regular cell phone, that's the only image that's going to load because the rest of them aren't going to load at all. They're not even being targeted for that screen size. Okay, so let's go back to the browser and take a look here. And you could see that when we do squeeze it all the way, even though the image shows up, we aren't really sizing it properly and we're certainly not giving it the right borders. Well, let's go back to the code editor, and once again, I'll go to styles.css and I will go to the super small here screen size, the extra small screen size. And what I'll do is I will paste some code here that I pre-baked again for this, and is going to overwrite that Jumbotron, or I should say add to the Jumbotron class. It will set some margins, give it some padding, the box shadow, and at this point it should be pretty much good to go. If I save it and go take a look, that's not exactly what I expected. I certainly didn't expect to see these white lines. So let's figure out why these white lines are showing up. Let's go ahead and right click and inspect the element, and we'll go ahead and choose that div, that Jumbotron class that we've been styling, and let's take a look here. Well, I think I could see what's going on here. We have padding right and padding left. So if we take them off, right, now it looks perfect. Now why isn't our padding, let's go back to our code, we did specify padding 0, but that doesn't seem to take any effect. Well, let's go back and take a look. And if you look closer, you see what's going on? I'll give you a second. Well, it's that good old specificity that's, again, getting in our way. You see, the padding is specified with dot container, class container, followed by a class Jumbotron, or class fluid, container fluid, followed by a class Jumbotron. Well, the problem is, if you look at our specificity, we only have one class, and they define it with 2 classes. So all we really should be able to have to do is just say container, and say now container followed by Jumbotron. Save that. We'll go back to the browser and look at that. Now it's actually exactly how we wanted it. In fact, it's probably a good idea to take this container Jumbotron combo and actually go through every single place where we specify Jumbotron and actually use that specificity so we don't get tripped up by this again. Let's go ahead and replace that everywhere. and replace that here as well. And now when we go back to the browser, we should be good to go. And if we stretch the browser, right, in every single screen size, we see that it's working just fine. As you can see, the IMG responsive class from Bootstrap is letting us now go to the IMG tag at this size and letting us stretch the image back and forth. And as we get to a higher size, now it's just a background image, and therefore it's just going to stay static but keep jumping every time we go to a different screen size. One last thing is we're specifying a couple of properties, namely border and box shadow, every single time that we specify container Jumbotron. Well, I think it's probably a waste, so let's go ahead and take that out and put it into a style that's outside any media queries. That way we're only going to have to specify it once and not have to specify it every single time for every media query, which seems a little bit wasteful, right? So let's take that out of here. And now that we're outside the media queries, let's go ahead and create a class called .container, container.jumbotron, and we'll cut and paste those two properties right here. And now it should be like that everywhere, and that's actually part of the home page. We save it, and we go back to the browser, and everything should pretty much work as it was before, and it's jumping through different sizes. And as you can see, everything is working, at least seems to be working just fine. Okay, so our Jumbotron is working, and we're ready to move on.